Jeremy Corbyn has given his first speech as Labour leader to the party conference in Brighton. Janan Ganesh, our political commentator, was there. What are your impressions after a fairly turbulent week?
That Labour are every bit as far from power as I suspected they were after May the 7th, when they lost the last general election. They have a leader who gave a very rambling, incoherent speech in which I think he spent the first 10 or 15 minutes just thanking random people rather than going straight to the argument. And it felt like a rally of people who just want to feel good in like-minded company, who want to repeat messages that no one will challenge within the party. And it's essentially a party that's doing things that it felt unable to do between 1994 and 2007 or 2010, when the likes of Tony Blair and Gordon Brown had pushed the party to a much more centrist direction. So it felt like almost a bit of a religious experience rather than a strategic political conference.
So new leader, but old think, old speech.
Yeah.
I mean, he even dug up apparently a part of a speech which Ed Miliband might have given but rejected 3 years ago.
Well, apparently a series of Labour leaders had rejected this speech as not being quite good enough, and Jeremy Corbyn thought it was fine for his first major national address to the country as Labour Party leader, which I think says something about his
operation.
And
any big new idea, policy idea, something that he's prepared to put a flag in the ground on?
Nothing new, lots of dramatic stuff, but it's stuff that you'd be familiar with from the 1980s, 1970s.
Such as?
To do with quite punitive rates of marginal taxation on income and wealth, to do with an incredibly hostile approach to business, especially big business. And in the realm of foreign policy, he reiterated his own position as being personally in favour of nuclear disarmament. He didn't quite say the party would be, and there's a debate to be had within the party, the parliamentary party, shadow cabinet, Jeremy Corbyn himself, about what their line on that issue is.
And on Trident, the nuclear missile, where he wants to scrap Trident and the party is not comfortable with that position.
And there are lots of people
somewhere... parliamentary party.
Yeah, exactly. And there are lots of people somewhere between the two who say, well, we can renew the deterrent, but in a cheaper way. But all of these positions, I think, will strike people as being incredibly recognisable from a generation ago. So it's not new ideas, it's interesting and dramatic ideas, but nothing particularly original at all.
And Janan, you wrote a very interesting column this week where you took on this notion that what people really need in modern politics is authenticity in leaders. And your take was actually authenticity is not the highest quality.
Yeah, I think most people in most societies for most of history will have demanded or been happy with much more rudimentary things from their leaders, like basic competence, not being corrupt, not launching a war every other year, not brutalising their own citizens. And even Britain, relatively recently, the 1950s, 60s, 70s, the average British person back then would have been happy with inflation that wasn't completely out of control, or decent housing. To be able to complain, if your principal complaint about politicians is a lack of authenticity, you're doing incredibly well as a country. You're an extraordinarily evolved country. So it's a sign, the rise of people like Jeremy Corbyn, who does have authenticity, is a sign of how many of our basic needs have been satisfied, that we can now focus on these slightly loftier demands.
Our political editor, George Parker, was talking to delegates in Brighton this week, and he came up with somebody who's close to Jeremy Corbyn, unidentified, who said he's got 2 years. Do you think that there is a chance that he won't make it through to the next election?
Every chance. I think there's one moment of judgment, which is next May, when there's a series of local and London and Scottish elections. If Labour do very badly, I can see a movement against him emerging. If he gets through that, then the EU referendum might be a good time. Say the referendum is held in 2017, the country votes to stay in, Cameron is renewed, but it's obvious that he's on his way out eventually because he's promised to leave before the next election. That sort of gives Labour a good excuse to have their own leadership conversation, and so he might go mid-term. I find it very unlikely that he'll survive until 2020.
We'll hold you to that, Janan. Thank you very much.
Thank you.